Welcome to All the F Words,
a podcast where two writer friends, nearly 30 years apart, explore everything we give an F about. I'm Gabi Moskowitz.
And I'm Joanne Green. On each episode of All the F Words, we'll focus on a theme starting with the letter F. Things like feminism, frugality, and fascism.
We'll share stories from our lives and our distinct generational perspectives and look to the experts for insights and ideas.
Today we're going to talk about fanaticism, as in fanatic behavior.
When you put it that way, it sounds extreme, but aren't sports fans also fanatics?
Yes, and
I looked it up, and a fanatic is defined as a person marked or motivated by an extreme, unreasoning enthusiasm for, say, a cause.
Right, a person whose extreme zeal goes beyond what is reasonable.
So a zealot.
Yes, but here's the thing. Sometimes the word is used to describe someone who's just devoted to their thing, whatever it is, their hobby, their sports team. The word fan is actually short for fanatic. Did you know that?
It makes sense.
It does make sense. So there are all different kinds of fanaticism. And of course, there are people who study this. There's consumer fanaticism, which is like just getting super impassioned about a particular person, group, trend, artwork, or idea. There's emotional fanaticism. There's ethnic or racial supremacist fanaticism. We won't even go there in this episode because somehow I feel like all roads lead to white supremacy, but we're not going to go there today. There's leisure fanaticism, which is people who become obsessed with a particular leisure activity, surfers or stand-up paddleboarders, skiers, certainly. There is patriotic fanaticism or nationalistic fanaticism.
Which sometimes also leads to white supremacy.
There you go. And then there's another kind, political and ideological fanaticism also leads to. And then there's the biggie, religious fanaticism, which is considered by many to be the most extreme form of fanaticism. And I would add to that perhaps the most dangerous in terms of the behaviors that it leads to. So then we get into the whole notion of fanaticism versus fundamentalism. And we're going to be following this show up with a show focused on fundamentalism. But I think today we can just touch on this a little bit, the difference between the two. Sports fanaticism is, the belief that all of the zeal can actually alter the game in favor of one's own team, that it's actually going to make a difference.
It makes me think about my first week of college. So growing up in California, I was never that into sports. My dad loved the Giants. He grew up a Dodgers fan in LA, became a Giants fan when he moved to California. He would, maybe yell at the TV a little bit, but it was just a fun thing that was kind of in my world. And then going to school in Boston, I'll never forget the first week of school, a new friend I had made came back from a party with a black eye because I think he was from New York and he was a Yankees fan, and he got into a physical altercation with a Red Sox fan. And
Gabi, first of all, one thing you need to know if you even visit Boston is that the Yankees suck, and you cannot say anything positive about the Yankees anywhere in New England. It's not just Boston. So that's just number one. I have a few things to say about this. First of all, Fred, my husband, our producer, also grew up a Dodgers fan and then became, actually an A's fan and a Giants fan, but I digress. The other thing is sports fanaticism is really weird because it becomes it's used as an ultra masculine sort of proving ground for brawls. And this happens in all different countries all over the world. It's called football hooliganism in some places, but also what I always say, testosterone and alcohol are a very bad combination. And when dudes drink, and then you put them in an environment where it's about sports, only bad things can happen, right? So, yeah, fanaticism it's crazy. And there are certain cities where just everybody is more passionate about their teams. Also, Fred had a project for many years called Fantasy Play-by-Play, where fans could pretend to be the announcer of the game, and talk about giving people an opportunity to let their fanaticism have like just free reign and be able to record themselves like screaming at the TV, which I think is a fantasy of some people, right? To be able to just espouse all their sports mania to anyone who will listen. Kind of interesting. You would walk away with a videotape of the footage of the game and your voice describing it. If this interests you, you can look it up. Fantasy play-by-play.
I'm trying to think of anything, outside of like, improving the world, or a more grandiose idea. I'm trying to think of anything I could apply that model to for myself.
No way.
I'm not coming up with anything.
No way. And I think part of that is because it's harmless, and it's the whole thing is play, right? Sports are play. So you don't know what's going to happen before the game begins. Then all these things happen, and then there's an ending. Where else in life does it work that way? I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I think, comparisons have been made to reality television for not to be too heteronormative and gendered here, but if more men typically are interested in that emotional dynamic with sports, there are many women who have a similar experience with, like, say, The Real Housewives or Project Runway, that kind of a thing. And it's a similar, I could see that being similar. You watch this thing play out in front of you. Now, in many cases, it's very scripted, but it's playing out in front of you. You don't know what's going to happen. And it feels like the stakes are real somehow. And yet it doesn't have a direct impact on your life. And so,
right. So you're taken for this wild ride, and then there's going to be a resolution, and then you can turn off the channel and go to bed.
Yes, exactly. And it's like there's catharsis of some sort.
Yeah, for me, it was always growing up. It was always talent shows, right? The Ted Mack Original Amateur Hour, and there was something in Boston called Community Auditions. Everybody would audition.
What was the first one?
Ted Mack's Original Amateur Hour. I think that was national.
Show?
Yeah, It was a TV show, and people would come on and do their little whatever it was, song and dance routine, dance or sing or play the recorder through their nose, just whatever their particular talent or skill was. And now I think when you list Project Runway and all those things, I actually go through that experience with American Idol. And So You Think You Can Dance. I think of it as very much pleasure. Yeah.
That's like a talent show, basically, right? You
pretty much.
You don't know what you're going to get.
Produced.
Yeah.
Highly produced and curated, but yeah, that is what it is. And you get the backstory. This is true of sports as well. You get the backstory of the individual competitors, and you always find something you can relate to. Oh, he went to my college, or, I don't know, whatever. He has the same last name. I mean, there are a number of, like, Draymond Green is my son. I mean, there's just a connection there because his name is Green.
Who's that?
You don't know who Draymond Green is? Shame on you, Gabs. He's one of the Warriors' superstars and amazing. But I know it's not your thing. I will not judge, she says.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, I think if we were going to get into my knowledge of sports, there would be a lot of judgment I would deserve. So
the only reason I know as much as I do is that I raised two sons who were both sports fanatics. And my husband—
I mean, you're also married to Fred Green.
It's also true.
Probably.
And I know there are people far more obsessed than Fred, but he's definitely a loyal fan.
My brother teases me mercilessly because I can never remember. I've gotten better at it, but so fantasy football, it's called fantasy football, but if asked, if I don't have a minute to think about it, I always call it pretend football
Oh,
or
that's
pretend
funny.
basketball. Like, because that's basically what it is, right? I know it's a
Well, no,
fantasy.
right. You draft. I actually know about this because, again, spent so much time around these males. I used to say I was drowning in a sea of testosterone, but that's neither here nor there. You pick a team, like you draft different players, and you have a made up team, and then I don't know how they compete, and you know who won or who lost, but that's like
I
the basic
think there's
idea.
some sort of point system. I really don't
Yeah.
get it.
Right.
But
So like if that football player scored points in his game on Sunday or Monday night or whenever they play, then you get those points. I think that's what it is.
maybe, I don't know. I don't know. If
Yeah, we're
anyone's
showing our
listening and wants to
ignorance here.
explain it to us.
Yeah. Oh God. And then it would be the whole mansplain thing. Right. But I have to say I'm the worst student because I think football has been explained to me a zillion times. And I still basically just see guys running that way and guys running that way. And everybody
Yep.
says, yay. And
Yep.
yeah, it's pretty much
That's
what
more
I
or less
see.
my understanding.
I see the color of the field. Sometimes there's snow on it. Yeah. That's about it. So I have to tell you, I've become a fan, not a fanatic, but a fan of this person. I don't even know if this person is male, female, or non-binary. Kalmer Marimaa, and I'm probably not pronouncing that way, but it's pronouncing it correctly, but it's Marimaa, a Ph.D. student in Estonia who wrote what I think is like the definitive thing on fanaticism. It's called The Many Faces of Fanaticism. Can you
Okay.
imagine this in Estonia, where I
It's
guess some
amazing.
people speak English, right? Or maybe this was translated into English. But I learned so much about fanaticism from Kalmer. So thank you, Kalmer, if you're listening. Um, Fanaticism can be negative and destructive, or it can be neutral. It can even be positive. And the reason it can be negative or destructive is that sometimes when people are fanatical, they react violently. And we've seen that all over the place. I mean, you see it literally at sports events, but you certainly see it when it's about an idea or about a religious fanaticism. I mean, really, without fanaticism, would we have wars? I don't know.
Good question.
Yeah. Another thing is that it's totally subjective. So when people label those who are different than they are as fanatic, they're showing their own bias. And the best example of this is a partisan in a war could be seen as a freedom fighter or as a terrorist. And this has happened again and again. You can certainly think about this in wartime. People
Right.
who are fighting for their country see themselves as freedom fighters. That's a positive thing. But whatever tactics they use may be seen as putting them into the category of terrorist.
Yeah.
So
So it's
another little
really
tidbit I got from, I'm sorry, what?
I was just going to say it's really an issue of perspective. It
Totally.
seems like whatever, wherever you're looking at it from indicates, what label you put on it.
Well, that's it. So that we all have differences. And when we cluster ourselves into groups that we think of as like minded, you and I often talk about how we live in a, progressive bubble here in Marin County, California. We tend to share, the vast majority of us tend to share a particular worldview. And
Mm-hmm.
we tend to label those who see it entirely differently. For instance, those who are applauding the Supreme Court decision, which invalidated Roe v. Wade, people who don't want any gun laws passed. We tend to see those people as extremist. We don't see ourselves as extremist, right?
Mm-hmm.
But
No.
they see us as extremist.
It makes me think about I have a real sensitivity, and I have no idea what this is about, but a real sensitivity to being not to being really misunderstood. not just in what I'm saying, but in who I am. And I can think of a few times, a few kind of sillier times when I first moved to Boston, which was a very different place from where I grew up. Also a generally pretty liberal area, but in a different way. People were different. I remember
Can you say
starting.
how?
It was a different kind. It was like if probably our politics were similar, but there was a more people were well, maybe not the sports fans, but it was a more. It was the East Coast sort of reserved, traditional vibe, gender roles. Like I remember going out on dates, and I had not been dating boys in high school. I mean, I was in high school, but I had not been dating boys who were taking me out to dinner or telling me when they were going to pick me up. Like that was not a thing we did in Northern California. Maybe it was just whoever I was dating, but it was I remember when my freshman year of college, a guy ordered for me at the restaurant. I was like so weirded out by it. He was trying to be nice. It's super weird. It was just, but what I was going to say is I remember one thing that really stood out to me is I heard from multiple different friends that they thought I was really crunchy. Like, I think I had, I don't know, maybe some natural beauty products, and I recycled, which at the time was, I guess, a bigger deal. I wasn't, I just kind of got dressed. I wasn't shy about covering up. I just got dressed in my dorm room in front of my roommates. I didn't really think about it. And
Because you went to Camp Tawonga.
As I went to Camp Tawonga, exactly. I got over all my body stuff because we were all skinny dipping in the river when I was 11 because it wasn't a big deal. But, it was weird for me that my sort of lefty liberal California stuff was perceived so much more strongly than it felt to me at home. And then I've had this, just on the subject of kind of crunchiness. Now, becoming a mom is another time in your life where you find out how crunchy you are or aren't. And I kind of leaned into, as I got older, the idea that I like natural things. But I also, when my kids were born, I used baby Tylenol and I swaddled them and put them in a crib and didn't co-sleep.
Disposable diapers?
We did use disposable diapers, still use disposable diapers for one of them. And it's not even a judgment call about what is or isn't okay. Although, once we get talking about vaccines, I have pretty strong feelings about what is important to do to take care of your kid. I am pro-vaccine, in case you're wondering. And but it was like, it was just a real juxtaposition against what it felt like when I was younger, and these feelings of crunchiness that I felt maybe weren't that big of a deal were perceived as super crunchy. And now I have conversations occasionally with other parents who think that I am on this other extreme end, because I use things with chemicals which keep us safe.
Well, so here's the thing. It is totally subjective. And I think the thing that maybe, not that I want to put words in your mouth, but maybe the thing that is really bothersome is when people take a look at one or two of your behaviors and then extrapolate and just generalize that you must also feel XYZ and you must also do XYZ when
absolutely.
No. Right.
Yeah. It feels like I'm being summarized or put into, this group that really doesn't feel natural to me, pardon the phrasing. And it's a weird feeling. I don't love it.
Interesting. So getting back to fans for a second, a fan can be really devoted to his, her, or their team without being fanatical. So an example of that would be a fan might want to wear a shirt that says San Francisco Warriors or whatever the team is, Boston Red Sox, that doesn't mean they're fanatical. But the person who, for instance, is a huge fan or was of Michael Jackson and then goes and has surgery to alter his appearance to look more like his idol, that's fanatical.
That's pretty extreme.
Right. So fandom becomes fanatical when there is no tolerance for the opposing team. So I jokingly said, that Yankees suck, and I'm originally from Boston, and but it's a joke, right? I don't really have a lack of tolerance for the opposing team, but there are plenty of people who do, and they are willing to get a black eye, as you were saying, for that cause. And that seems to me to be going over the edge. That's fanatical.
I totally agree with you. And we are going to pick up on that in just a few minutes after this break.
Some people are really predisposed to fanaticism. If you think of fanaticism, Gabi, as like a behavior trait, there are things that you can look at in a person that might indicate that they could become fanatical about something. So, for instance, dogmatic people who are willing to deny facts because they're so attached to a particular idea or viewpoint. And we see this all the time. Oh, let's take, for example, someone who absolutely insists that he won an election when all the facts indicate otherwise. And all the people, his trusted advisors, are telling him, no, you didn't win the election. Okay, so that would be a fanaticism. So that's called unwavering conviction about the absolute rightness of one's understanding, no matter what. And then the other is seeking
not dissimilar to. It reminds me of. I remember even thinking this at the time, perhaps because of the life that I am living right now, but of a 3-year-old who doesn't want to go to bed. Really not that different in terms of energy from someone who has in fact lost an election but doesn't want to admit it. Just throwing that out.
Well, I think you raise an important point, which is that some of these behaviors are appropriate developmentally at some point in life. And then one hopes that we grow from that point and mature and understand that the world is not black and white. And there are many shades of gray, and there are many factors that go into a determination, right? And that there are some things that are just fact and other things that are opinion and viewpoint. And being able to ascertain the difference between the two is something that I think mature individuals learn to do. The other thing, another trait that sets somebody up to be a fanatic is this need to impose one's convictions on other people. And that actually is said to be one of the differences between fundamentalism and fanaticism. Fundamentalists really don't want to validate any other viewpoint. And when it comes to religion, it's really easy to say, I am absolutely certain that whatever, Jesus died for my sins or whatever the thing is. And if you don't believe that, you're just wrong, right? So that it's this need to say there is no other valid worldview. And therefore, I'm going to spend my time trying to convince people who don't see it my way to see it my way.
Well, yeah, it's interesting. Have you seen there's this meme going around and it's about, like keeping kosher, for example. Religious freedom is saying, I don't keep kosher, or I keep kosher, therefore it's wrong for me. Not that anyone's doing this with keeping kosher, but I don't keep kosher, therefore it's wrong for me to eat bacon. But it's not religious freedom to say, I keep kosher and therefore you cannot eat bacon. It's against my religion for you to eat bacon. That's not how religious freedom works. And so, take out bacon.
Except what about if the you is also Jewish? And so the person who keeps kosher is saying you are not a good Jew because you are not following the law.
Well, that is definitely an issue, is people who, but my point is more people who use the, if it's against one's religion to have, say, an abortion, but it's not against my religion, and or I'm just not that other person. It's not really okay if the person you're talking to is your religion or isn't. If it's against your religion, then you don't do the thing. But I think that's
Right.
again
And
where
go
the
and be
perspective
well and
comes
don't
in.
do that. Right.
Exactly. Right. Exactly.
So it really boils down to this idea of a dualistic worldview, that our way is good, their way is bad. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And people need to, for some reason, and I don't fully understand this, and I'm sure there are social scientists studying this all the time. Why do we need to set up an us and them? And we do. It's crazy. And the other thing is this idea of sacrificing for the goal, right? So a self-sacrificial devotion, where rational thinking and common sense get pushed aside because you've already determined the outcome. So now it's like it doesn't matter what happens between point A and coming to that conclusion, even if it's 12 facts that prove otherwise, that a different conclusion is in order. You just ignore that and hang on to the conclusion. So one of the things that the experts say is that devotion itself is more important than the object of devotion, right? So it doesn't really matter who won the election. Devotion to Donald Trump is what matters.
Yeah, and you know what has so bolstered not only devotion to Donald Trump, but just the fact that devotion can be enough to keep someone going is social media, because memes exist, as per the point I made like 6 minutes ago. Memes exist, and memes are sometimes enough. It's like they're the rosary beads, they're the incantation of a lot of current political discourse, because people get revved up in these bubbles that we create online and in life, but also online. And it's just, it's like I'm ranting at this point, I realize, and it's gonna undermine what I'm about to say. But it's a little bit like how we're very brave, say in our cars. We're very brave when somebody does something we don't like. We'll say all kinds of terrible things to them from the safety behind the glass of our windows. Listeners can't see, but I'm wildly gesticulating, creating the glass around me with my hand. Anyway, we're very brave, and it's just like that on Twitter or on Facebook and Instagram. Save for the fear of being doxxed, people will make all kinds of terrible comments, and I know because I've received a lot of them. Or say bananas things about Hillary Clinton or any politician, and it's like exposing oneself to that is the same sort of just a blank devotion that revs up fanaticism, that sometimes ends up feeling like fanaticism for the sake of fanaticism. It kind of feels like the end goal almost doesn't even exist anymore.
You know who make the best fanatics?
Who?
Young males. And you know who really knows this? Dictators. Think about ISIS, or, there's a million examples. And here's some reasons why young males are natural fanatics. They readily identify with a group.
Young males who think they're disenfranchised, in particular, I would say. Young males who think something's being taken away.
Absolutely. But here's some very specific reasons why young males are naturals and so easily recruited also for these kinds of causes. They readily identify with a group. They form close bonds with group members. They're prone to follow a strong leader. And these are my favorites. They like taking risks, and they always underestimate the danger of the risks.
Yeah.
So perfect.
Right.
And you mentioned something about when the female brain is fully developed in an earlier episode. I think it was our foolishness episode. Male frontal lobes don't mature until one is in one's late 20s. But testosterone is flowing freely. So that combination of testosterone and the brain not having fully developed is a potentially toxic mixture.
Yeah, their hormones are writing checks that their maturity cannot cash.
Right. Oh, I like that. That's a good one. So as a little teaser for our next episode on fundamentalism, here's something I found. And Gabi, you're going to dive a lot more deeply on this and have a lot to tell us. But one thing that I noted was a fanatic may not care what others believe. I am passionate about this. You're on my team. We all feel the same way. Let's gung ho. A fundamentalist sees their worldview as universal and believes that others should see it too. So that's where you get situations where you're recruiting new members or you are completely downplaying the validity of any other viewpoint.
Yeah. I mean, I think that they have a lot in common. I think that it is hard. Fundamentalism does not survive without fanaticism, but I think one can be a fanatic without also being a fundamentalist, depending on what they're a fanatic about.
Can you be a fundamentalist without being a fanatic?
I think you have to be a fanatic about, I think it's a little bit like doing Mad Libs with my kid right now. And so I'm thinking a lot in terms of parts of speech. And it's almost like fundamentalism. It's like fundamentalism is the important noun and fanaticizing. I don't even know if that's actual. It's like the verb that keeps fundamentalism going. I know I'm butchering this, but I think you'll get my point. What keeps fundamentalism going is fanaticism. Like fundamentalism is perhaps the root. Fanaticism is the fertilizer and the water and the sun that really makes it grow. Yeah, exactly. But I think depending on what you're a fanatic about, you can engage without necessarily engaging in fundamentalism, depending on what it is. But we'll get more into that next week.
For a minute. Your daughter's only 4 years old. You're already teaching her the parts of speech?
Oh my God. Unsolicited parenting recommendation. If you have a super verbal toddler who, I mean, your granddaughter would love this, I already know. Junior Mad Libs is the most fun we have ever had. It's just nouns. It's nouns, verbs, and adjectives, and then one like miscellaneous, which is just any crazy word they want to come up with. And, they have to do it with an adult, obviously. And she's learning the parts of speech, but I mean, and everything. It's like pooping, or poopy.
Oh,
like it's all bathroom stuff. But she's having the most fun, laughs her head off, and is getting so into storytelling and structure of storytelling. It's educational, hilarious, fun. I cannot recommend it enough. So yeah.
I'm going to try that. I have to say, I was working with my great nephew, who I believe at the time was in 5th grade and doing the parts of speech. And I pulled out Mad Libs, and he and I had such a blast with it. And he just, because it was so much fun, he learned what an adverb was and a prepositional phrase really quickly. So yeah, learning with games has nothing to do with fanaticism, but it's all good.
Well, if maybe we'll become early language fanatics, and we can start like a Mad Lib MLM or something.
There are worse things. Thanks for listening to all the F words today. Gabi and I love doing the show, and we're thrilled that you apparently like listening. Please follow us, rate us, review us, do all those things, and that'll help us grow our audience.
Fanatic or not, you can hang out with us on social media. We are on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube at allthefwordspod, and we would love to hear from you. We are at allthefwordspod@gmail.com.
Bye-bye.